Thank you very much, Karen. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, but good afternoon if you're across in other parts of the world. This is a real first for West Yorkshire and Harrogate to do an international webinar, and huge thanks goes to our guest speakers. But I think we should also recognise the technical team, the IT, the publicity team, and also very much Joe Baker, who is our Harnessing Power of Communities lead, who has been masterminding all of this. So thanks, Joe. And I know you're going to support our guest speakers and the IT should it be necessary. I'm sorry, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Hilary Thompson. I'm the Senior Responsible Officer for the Harnessing Power of Communities work across West Yorkshire and Harrogate. And it's my great privilege to be chairing this today. Rob Webster, our Chief Executive for the West Yorkshire and Healthcare Partnership, will be joining us later, but he's been called into a government meeting. As you can appreciate, he didn't have much choice in doing that. He said he would rather be here. I just want people to realise that we have got technology in Malawi, we've got technology in Tajikistan, and even we've got technology in Huddersfield that doesn't always work. So please bear with us. If anybody's having real problems, please try and put your hand up. Or if you really can't get a connection, go online and watch this, because it is being filmed and will be reviewed later, and people can watch it online. But our second webinar around community resilience is a really exciting thing to be doing, because the one in July, which was a homegrown event, got no end of participants, got no end of people watching it, and it really showed the ability of the voluntary and community sector. This one, with the international flavour, just helped us reflect about this pandemic, and the work of the voluntary sector is a worldwide phenomenon. We are using Teams, so please put yourself on mute unless you're speaking, because otherwise we do get feedback. If you are speaking, please have your camera on. Use the raise your hand function if you possibly can, and then I will bring people in. We will have set times for questions so that we don't. And the chat will be monitored, so if you need to ask a question there, then please do. I think everybody will realise that the role of the community and voluntary sector is vital across the world. Neighbourhood support to keep people safe and happy and well has never been more important at this time. And a thriving third sector is vital to the health and care system. And again, COVID pandemic is highlighting that worldwide. The voluntary sector offers empathy, understanding, and a very practical approach to supporting people. I think most people would agree that the voluntary sector says we have a can-do attitude, we'll get on and do it, and we'll worry about the consequences afterwards. We often do things without seeking permission because we know it's the right thing to have a go at and to do. The pandemic has highlighted both the strength and the fragility of the sector. And I think it's brought the voluntary sector to a lot of people's forefront in their minds. It's been those people that have been helping people out. Volunteering in all its forms has been going for goodness knows how many decades. And I think we need to say a really, really big thank you to all our volunteers across the world. And I'd like to say a big thank you to our volunteers across West Yorkshire and Harrogate for what you've stepped up and done over this terrible time, and the range of skills and support that you've offered. Health inequalities have really come to the forefront through this pandemic. They've always been there, but I think they're very much on people's radar. And we now need to really show collaboration and understanding to be able to try and help one another out in the best possible way. We did a resilience report across West Yorkshire and Harrogate in March and April with over 300 organisations looking at what was the effect of the immediate pandemic on them as organisations, how they were adapting, how they were changing, and more importantly, how they were helping to support 2.7 million people across our patch. I'm sure so many of these things have been happening worldwide, and we're going to hear about those today and support for vital services. It's all about now bringing organisations together, using that local intelligence and local information to make a difference to those that are perhaps hardest hit. So this is a real opportunity to learn about robust, resilient and sustainable communities, both at home and abroad, from a variety of our speakers. They come from very different viewpoints. They have very different circumstances in the countries that they are in, or in the places that they are in the UK. But at the end of the day, every one of them is about helping people, and people are at the heart of this. This is an opportunity to celebrate what's going on, to learn about what's going on, and to think about the challenges, think about the injustices, think about the inequalities, and try and work out a way collaboratively of doing things differently. But it is all around people, and it's all around making people smile. I think we have to remember that with COVID and all the rules and regulations, we have to try and give people some hope. And I think today our speakers will do that. I'm not going to introduce them all individually, but we're starting off with Charles in Malawi, who's talking about the challenges of exclusion, and particularly around people with disability. Then we move on to Sam, who is going to talk about tradition, preserving tradition and adapting, changing things, and peer-to-peer support, with a lot of emphasis on loneliness and isolation in the work with the Sikh elders. Manuchera in Tajikistan, who I think it's afternoon out there, is going to talk about women and gender inequality. And I think it's very interesting that she's going to come from a fashion and design point of view, and the power of women. Very much close to my heart, not fashion and design, as you can probably tell, but fantastic to be bringing that here to a textile town of Huddersfield and a textile area of West Yorkshire and Harrogate. And Panir is going to be talking about injustices and racial inequality, so very topical, but also about advocacy and speaking up. With no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Charles in Malawi. Let's hope the technology works. If not, Joe Baker is going to step in, so we'll have a smooth and seamless morning. And thank you again to all our speakers, and look forward to your presentations. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Charles Kaula. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of People with Physical Disabilities in Malawi. I'm going to talk about disability and exclusion in Malawi. But first, let me start by giving you a small overview of the country. It is a landlocked country sharing its borders with Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. In fact, it is among the 10 poorest countries. The country is agri-based and employs 80% of the population, but its economic growth has been interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let me talk about disability. The next slide. According to the 2018 Population and Housing Census, 10.4% of the population is made up of people with disabilities, and the majority live in the rural areas. Violence against people with disabilities continues to be an issue in Malawi. We've had several people of albinism being abducted and killed, gender-based violence, sexual abuse against women with disabilities have been reported, and some persecuted. One of the challenges people with disabilities face in Malawi is the implementation of the government policy on disability, which is uncoordinated. It is not easy for people with disabilities to access basic services like education and employment. Another issue of exclusion is the underrepresentation of people with disabilities in the decision making. For the past decade, disability has been taken as a charity issue and not a rights and development issue in the national agenda. Now, our organization, as an association, our mission is to facilitate the removal of architectural and attitudinal barriers that limit the independence of persons with physical disabilities, and also promote a positive change in the attitudes about disability and persons with physical disabilities, and encourage greater independence for persons with disabilities within our communities. Since the middle of 2019 to the beginning of this year, we did a project called Fair Play in 4 primary schools in Blantyre as part of inclusive education. The project involved training children with disabilities together with those without on sitting volleyball, and the impact has been so tremendous. Now, can I have the previous slide, please? Not this one. Okay, now let me talk about disability in Malawi, COVID-19 in Malawi. So far, we have more than 5,700 confirmed cases and over 175 deaths, which of course included one of our executive council members. People with disabilities have been affected more with this pandemic due to various factors. Some of the measures that have been put in place to keep safe are not disability friendly. The task forces that have been put in place for this pandemic have not been including people with disabilities. People with disabilities are more susceptible to contract the virus due to their pre-existing health conditions. And also people with disabilities depend more on others for support. But now they've been isolated due to restricted movements and social distancing. Also, wash facilities are not accessible. Due to the shutdown of some formal and informal sectors, people with disabilities who have been employed in these sectors have gone for months without pay, and others have lost their jobs. So unless the government intervenes, the socio-economic resilience of people with disabilities is uncertain. Now, as an organization, we got a grant from Disability Rights Fund, which we used to do a nationwide awareness campaign on COVID-19 and people with disabilities. Using information from the WHO, we produced documentaries, both on video and audio, containing information about how people with disabilities and their caregivers should protect themselves from infection and what to do if they are infected. We've sent the videos to some of the television stations, and the audios were sent to most of the community radio stations in the districts of the country. We also used the social media, that is the WhatsApp and the text messages. We were translating the messages from WHO into the vernacular, and using our district structures, every week we are sending new messages to the district executive members with airtime bundles so that they also forward the messages to their friends and relatives on the network. We did this for 3 months. Now, what next as an organization? At the moment, we are trying to work with the government to make sure that the minimum access standards for public infrastructure and services for persons with disabilities should now be enforced by Malawi Bureau of Standards. Number 2 is we are going to work with Office of the Director of Public Procurement to release a directive advising public bodies on the need to ensure disability inclusion in the public procurement process. This we are doing simply because whenever substructures are government structures or schools are being built, they need quotations, maybe 3 quotations. But most of the times they are allowed the cheapest quotation to be implemented. And whenever you want to build something that is disability friendly, you don't look for it cheap. You have to change the policy now. That's why we are asking these people to change their policy on the procurement. Number 3, there is need for more awareness on COVID-19 among the communities to ensure safety of people with disabilities. And through our district committees, we would like to reach out to the community leaders and the law enforcers so that those involved in gender-based violence and land grabbing should be put to book. And we are also trying to partner with companies that deal with agriculture produce so that our members who mainly rely on agriculture can have access to markets, thereby achieving independent living and quality of life. The next one is that we want to make sure that there is representation of people with disabilities in all district councils to enhance active participation in the society. Now, as we are seriously working on access to infrastructure and community acceptance, then we are very sure that access to employment can also be achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Charles. That was very, very interesting. And I think we've all started off with a geography lesson and then some beautiful smiling faces, but then some very serious aspects around what's going on in your country. And some of the challenges that you're facing are so familiar with some of the challenges that we face here for people with disability. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Sam now, who's going to talk to us around her project and work with Touchstone, but also with the Sikh Elders Service. And then when Sam's done her presentation, we will have opportunity for questions. So Sam, are you ready to go?
I am, yes.
Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Gursam Kaur Danjal. I am Sikh and I follow the traditions of our colourful and historical heritage. I have a husband and 2 sons, and we enjoy a lot of family time together, and we love going abroad, visiting different destinations. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this, the Sikhism culture, the religion. So it's a fairly new religion which derived just over 500 years ago. It was founded by our first Guru, Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Sikhism is based on the spiritual teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji and also the 9 gurus that succeeded him. It preaches a message of devotion, remembrance of God at all times, which includes truthful living and equality of mankind. Our 11th and living guru is our holy book, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. This has all the teachings and scriptures of the 10 gurus that embodies the Sikh culture and giving Sikhs the spiritual guidance on how to be a good human being and impairing the code of selfless service. So the Sikh religion was founded in 1500 and Guru Nanak Dev Ji taught us that living an active and practical life of truthfulness, self-control and purity is above the truth and what a Sikh should follow. So there's 3 main principles that every Sikh should live and follow on a daily basis are Naam Japo, which means meditate on God's name, Girt Karo, earn an honest living, and Vand Ke Shako, which is share with others. By following these principles, it makes us better Sikhs and human beings and helps us to stay away from the 5 vices, which are Kaam, which is lust, krodh, anger, lobh, greed, moh, attachment, and ankar. As of data published in 2019, the Sikh population around the world is 25 million, but in the UK alone, there are around 432,000 Sikhs. So each of our 10 gurus have scripted their teachings and their wisdom in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. The first and the 10th gurus have played a more significant role in the Sikh religion. In 1699, our 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, established the Khalsa. This upholds the highest Sikh virtues of commitment, dedication, and social conscience. The Khalsa are men and women who have undergone the Sikh baptism ceremony and strictly follow the Sikh code of conduct and wear the physical articles of faith, which are gesh, uncut hair, a ganga, which is a small wooden comb, the gura, an iron bangle, the girban, which is a ceremonial dagger, and the kashera, which are undergarments. On this day, Sikhs were all given their true identity of wearing the turban for men, and the Sikh males were given the name Singh, which means lion, and all the women were given the middle name as Kaur, which means princess. I've attached links for you for further information if you require. So the holy place of worship for Sikhs is called a Gurdwara. It means the house of God. So each Gurdwara has a Darbar Sahib where the current and everlasting Guru of the Sikhs, the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, is placed on a takhat, which is an elevated throne in a prominent central position. The Gyanis, who are priests, recite, sing and explain the verses from the Guru Granth Sahib Ji in the presence of the congregation. All Gurdwaras have a langar hall where people from all faiths, caste, creed, gender and religion can eat free vegetarian food, which is cooked and served by volunteers at the Gurdwara. The most spiritual shrine on earth for us Sikhs is the Harmandir Sahib, which is the Golden Temple in Amritsar in India. It's not only a central religious place for Sikhs, but also a symbol of human brotherhood and equality. The Gurdwara has 4 open doors, which symbolises that anybody, irrespective of caste, creed or race, can seek spiritual guidance and religious fulfilment. Again, I've attached more links for further information. So I'll just talk a little bit about our organisation and who I work for. So TOUCHSTONE is a mental health charity and we provide wellbeing services to over 2,000 people across Yorkshire. TOUCHSTONE started in 1982, where large numbers of vulnerable people were left isolated and distressed out of hours and at weekends. 30 years later, TOUCHSTONE now works across communities to grow confidence and capacity to demand the services and positive experiences they are entitled to. We ensure that people with mental health problems are at the heart and at the centre of our planning. So that's TOUCHSTONE, and I'll talk a little bit about the Sikh Elders Service. So Sikh Elders started over 13 years ago when community members realised there was a need for a service to support them mentally and physically. TOUCHSTONE were awarded the service and the service is funded by Leeds City Council. We have tried to embed the virtues of selfless service in the work that we do at Sikh Elders Service. Our aim is to improve the health and well-being of Sikh elders by supporting them to live independently and to live fulfilling lives. We are a dedicated Punjabi-speaking team who provide specialised provision and support. We address the many issues affecting all elders in the community, and we do this by offering a combination of one-to-one support and group activities. So I've given some notes in the slides where you can have a look at what we do. We signpost to other support services. We offer individual support by offering home visits or by telephone contact to our service users. We've tried to help reduce loneliness and isolation whilst promoting good health. We do organise trips out to local places of interest. We take our Sikh elders out to beaches once a year when it's the summer holidays. We try to make memorable outings with them and offer them the chance to engage in thoughtfulness and reflection as well. So the team is myself, I'm the manager. We have Sarabjit Kaur, who is this community support and volunteer worker, Kuldip Kaur Dupa, who is our administrator. We also have a valued team of committed volunteers who spend most of their spare time furthering the work of the service that we do. They help with the admin tasks, serving refreshments and lunch to service users, and also participation with group activities that we hold each week. Since the pandemic, obviously all group work has been postponed, and we are at the moment making video calls to all our Sikh elders on a weekly basis, and we are keeping in contact with all the other service users via phone call each week, just to make sure that they're absolutely fine, as at the moment we are all enduring this hardship, and we are feeling isolated as well. So again, for us, it's very important that our Sikh elders are at the heart of making sure that they're absolutely fine. I've included some pictures of what we do, and of our many trips that we've had as well. Just talking a little bit about community resilience. Again, as Sikhs, we do try our best to follow the teachings of the gurus and implement them in our daily lives, as such as Naam Japo, Vand Ke Shako and Keep Karo, and this is embedded in the Sikh Elder Service. So during the pandemic, many of our gurdwaras have been kept open. Just their kitchens have been kept open to make and provide food to key workers, the homeless and the less fortunate. The community have got together to take part in this service voluntarily, and this was done in line with all government guidelines and social distancing. Also, when families endure bereavement, the community get together and we support the bereaved family, and we can help with anything from cooking the food to organising the funeral arrangements. During COVID, this has been we've lost many loved ones, and this support that we've generally given by the community has not been possible. However, the community have still played their part by doing prayers and hymns over virtual applications to support the family. In the time of need for a family, the community get together and we raise donations to try and help and fund the family. It doesn't have to be monetary, it can be clothes, food, anything, even time. 5 minutes of your time for this member of the family can mean the world to them. So many years ago, in the 60s and 70s, South Asian communities came over from India and East Africa, emigrated over to England. They suffered a lot of injustices and discrimination. One of the examples that I grew up remembering is the Mandla versus the Dowley case. This is where a Sikh boy was refused entry to school in Birmingham by the head teacher because he wore a turban. So he was told to stop wearing the turban and told to cut his hair. The boy was taken out of that school and sent to a different school, but his father actually lodged a complaint and fought this in court. And the House of Lords held in favour of the Commission for Racial Equality, and we won the case. So that was a fantastic outcome for Sikhs, and especially Sikh boys. Another example that is of the struggle was of seeking jobs. Many, again, faced racial discrimination, again, with the turban. They had, Sikh men were told to cut their hair. So one example, again, was a bus driver who lived in the Midlands and was told to cut his hair in order to maintain his role. So his uncles, who had already been to England longer than him, forcefully cut his hair so he could get the job. So Mr. Sandhu worked as a bus driver and had some time off for a short illness. On his return to work, so while he was off on his illness, he maintained his beard and kept his turban. When he came back to work, went on his round trip, came back and he was told to go home and shave. He then refused and was suspended. So he wasn't happy. He met somebody called Sohan Singh Jolly, who was a police officer for the British Raj in Kenya. So after speaking to him, they decided to do a march. So 6,000 Sikhs got together and had this march in the Midlands to show solidarity, and this again played a part in the win to wear turbans at work. So for me, Mr. Sandhu changed legislation about religious expression at work, and Sikhs no longer had to compromise on their identity. But overall, whatever festival or celebration is being held, South Asian communities do rally together to make it a joyous event, and we will help support family and friends to achieve this. At the end of the day, we should all be kind and helpful to each other, and I think this is what all makes us stronger and united. But as a result of all the challenges faced by the first generation, such as injustice, racial discrimination and inequalities, it has meant that the generations to follow can lead an easier life. They are more accepted and don't face such harsh challenges. They have seen their parents struggle and work hard to provide, which has led them to work even harder, which has resulted in some very successful big businessmen and women. And some notable people are Ruben Singh, who is CEO of Contact Centre Care Company, Dr. Manjeet Singh Raya, emergency care consultant at University Hospitals of Derby and Burton NHS Foundation Trust. But in conclusion, any service that is conducted in a voluntary manner through the love of humanity, peace and compassion stands for what the Sikh faith is all about. This does not mean that it has to be a Sikh elder service or any other service. It just follows the core values of Sikhism. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Sam. That was excellent. And Sam, can we make sure everybody's on mute, please, because I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. Sam, that was really excellent. And I think Charles started us off with a geography lesson, and you've gone in now to culture and religious lesson. I'm sure we've all learned a huge amount about Sikhism. Certainly a lot of information that I'd never come across. So thank you for that. I think you've also highlighted some very key points that cut across whole of society, the whole of the world, about truthful living, selfless service. That's so important. And then about being mindful, and the meditation bit caught me. I think particularly with World Mental Health Day tomorrow, that sort of time for yourself and meditation is important. You talked about honest living and sharing with others, all fantastic qualities that go around the world. And then I like the bit about you were helping people to make memories. That's so important. And as we all get older, those memories are more and more cherished. You had in common with Charles some very nice smiley faces, and then somebody popped up in the chat and said, "Wow, that's me, and that's my group." So that was really fantastic. And then the other thing that you both talked about was using virtual applications. Charles talked about using WhatsApp, and you talked about using digital and technology. I think that's something that's really grown through this period. Your final thoughts of love, peace and compassion, I think, are qualities that we could all use and learn, and hopefully all follow. We're actually a little bit ahead of time, so that gives people great time for questions. So first of all, do we have any hands up for questions or anything in the chat box? Who'd like to start us off with questions? I'm hoping Charles is still there with the technology.
No questions in the chat box so far, Hilary, but just tons and tons of positive feedback from everybody. Yeah, just saying, and it's just amazing. Yeah. Okay. There's a question for you from Joe.
I've got a hand up from Joe. Do you want to go first?
Hi. Yeah, I will. Thanks, Hilary. Both of you, thank you. That was fab. I know everyone was a little bit nervous, but you've been amazing, haven't you? Charles, I just wanted to start by saying I think you've really undersold the amazing work that your organisation does in Malawi. And just for context, they do not have the health and care services that we have here in the UK. Every single person is a volunteer in their organisation. They don't have access to the equipment that we have. So Charles and his colleagues are really working against the odds there. And I didn't know, Charles, if you wanted to say a bit more about how you've overcome some of that with your work on even having accessible toilets in public spaces. They don't even have those. So you've done some great stuff on things like that, haven't you, Charles? Charles, you're not being heard. You're on mute, I think.
Oh, hello?
Yes, yes.
Then I have a problem because I've taken off my headsets, but I can't hear you. So let me try again. But anyway, you can go ahead. Let me just
we can
try
hear you
something
now.
else. Yeah.
We can hear you.
This doesn't
Oh,
work.
I don't think Charles can hear us.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear us?
Charles, we'd like to hear a little bit more about how you've coped with adversity, as in you don't even always have accessible toilets.
Still can't hear you, Charles. Thought it was going too well. All right, never mind. Try going on mute again. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Charles, can you hear us now?
Then my speakers don't work. I can see you, but
You can't
I
hear
can't
us.
hear you.
We
Okay.
can hear you.
We can hear you.
How did it work?
I'm going to ask Alison a question. Sorry, I'm going to ask Sam a question. I'm being thrown because your screen says Alison against it. Sam, how did you get your older Sikh elders, that's a bit of a mouthful, but to embrace the technology and cope with the changing to technology through what's happened with COVID?
It's been a challenge. We are quite fortunate that a lot of them do live with grandchildren who have helped them kind of source those digital applications. There are a handful who do live alone, which has been quite challenging for us. But what we've done is we've prepared notes in Punjabi and in English, and we've posted it through their letterboxes to show them how to turn on the iPads or the phones, and just showing them step by step how to do so. And touch wood, it's actually worked. It's been great. And having to see them, so we do group work once a week, and having seeing them and seeing our service users and them seeing each other has been fantastic for them, because they've just not been able to leave the house at all.
And did most people have access to equipment? Because I know that's been a challenge in many communities. So
not many did, but we were very fortunate that we had some funding through digital inclusion, and I bought some tablets for our Sikh elders through that funding, which has been a huge help, and I cannot thank them enough.
That's brilliant, and it's very encouraging. I think we've all got to work on that digital inclusion much further. I think there was a question now in the chat box. Somebody just check the chat box for me, please, Karen.
I've got it, thank you. Yeah, so Mike Chitty, who joined us on the first one, you may recall, Hilary, at the first event. To what extent is data poverty a challenge in Leeds and Malawi? Both access to devices and access to broadband.
I don't know whether Charles has heard that question. I hope he has, about access to broadband in Malawi. And what's broadband access like in Leeds?
So broadband hasn't been an issue. We are quite fortunate that we are living in a country that, you know, these kind of technologies are available to us.
Okay, Charles, what's broadband connection like in Malawi?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, broadband is, yeah, I think you can only find it in the cities like Blantyre and Lilongwe, the main cities, but it's not available in the rural areas. So we should not say that we only people who are staying in town are the ones who are lucky to have broadband. And I think somebody was asking about wheelchairs or something like that. I just heard it. And that's also another big challenge to us in Malawi, because we don't manufacture our own wheelchairs. And sometimes we rely on donations from Europe or from other parts of the world. And this becomes a very big problem, because we have many people who really need wheelchairs, people who need assistive devices like crutches and calipers and so on. And this is a big problem. Anyway, we try to lobby the government to put at least a budget on assistive devices, but anyway, our governments, they're not settled yet. These are things that they are not even taken care as a priority in this country. So we still are struggling, but we're trying to advocate for this.
Yeah, thank you for that. What about using the WhatsApp? Who had access to WhatsApp? Has that been generally okay?
Yeah. WhatsApp. Most of the people here in Malawi have at least a cell phone or a phone, even in the village. And now we rely on the service providers. They make sure that at least there is internet or there is network even in the rural areas. For that is possible. But for internet, as what you're talking about, broadband and the other things, that it's used to other areas. It's not easy. Yeah. But WhatsApp is everybody has got. At least most of the people have got WhatsApp. That's why we managed to pass our messages through to the villages even.
Well, it's brilliant that they have got WhatsApp, and I think we should be grateful that WhatsApp's around. As long as it's used correctly, that's really good. Karen, have we got any other questions in the chat box, please?
Sorry, I'm on mute. I'm having IT issues today, and I'm here in Huddersfield. Just a lot of comments in conversation around broadband access in Bradford and also in Leeds, and talk about digital exclusion, a little bit of comment like that. But then just one thing really, from Joe Rothery. Charles, it sounds like you have some big challenges to change people's views on inequalities. Are you seeing a change in people's thinking through the work you do?
Yeah, but very slowly. It's not as we expected. It takes a long time. Stigma is still there, because we see it even on the authorities, like the government authorities. Even if you try to bring an issue, it takes a long time before they make a decision on it. So it's just taking, it's slowly coming up, but not as we expected. The attitude is still, quite difficult, negative.
Has Sam, have you got any tips for Charles about changing attitudes from what you've learnt in working in Leeds?
Changing attitudes in
government and people that have influence?
Yeah.
Not sure. Just be yourself. Try to just let them know what challenges you're facing. I know it's very hard because you're in a completely different country and they view things very different as well. But yeah, just stay positive and keep the community positive as well.
I think from the photographs we saw, there looked to be some great positive people there. And Charles, obviously, keep up that good work. It is a slow process, but suddenly somebody sees the light and something changes, and that's what we've all got to hope for. Is there any other questions that we'd like to ask of either Charles or Sam at this point? I'm hoping that they will both stay on the call so that we can bring further questions in towards the end. Is there anybody at the moment?
Just Hannah. Hannah makes a really valuable point. Keeping people with learning disabilities connected using tablets and phone in itself is a challenge. So really interesting point there. And then nothing else, thank you. So when you're ready, Hilary, could perhaps go for a little bit of an early break and come back a couple of minutes earlier, and then it might buy you some time for your other guest speakers.
Yeah, Karen, great thought. That was what I was going to suggest. I just don't want to lose anybody's connections. So
don't switch your IT off.
Don't switch your IT off. By my computer, it says 12:19. If everybody could be back at 12:25, we're going to hope that Manuchera's connection stays on, and then we'll be hearing from Manuchera and Penina. Thank you again to Sam and Charles, and hope you'll join us towards the end for further questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
back on here, but I'm sure we've got a worldwide audience. I forgot to mention at the beginning that we did think that maybe some ministers and some very important people, both from Malawi and Tajikistan, might be actually on the call. So if they are and listening in, very much welcome to the UK. I've just been having a lovely conversation with Manuchera, telling me that fashion and sewing and embroidery and knitting and everything is a hobby and a passion and something that's been passed down the family generations. Very good afternoon to Manuchera. It's nearly 4:30 in Tajikistan, so 4:30 on a Friday afternoon to come and participate in a West Yorkshire and Harrogate webinar is very special, and we'll give you a very warm West Yorkshire welcome. Manuchera, over to you.
Thank you. So again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuchera. I'm from Tajikistan, and I'm very pleased to be here to be part of this webinar today. So I lead the organization called Development of Folk Craft and Young Designer, and I would like to tell you about Tajikistan, which I'm sure not everyone know about. It's a very small country. We were a part of former Soviet Union, which is now independent country, Tajikistan, since 1992. It's located in the very middle of Central Asia, neighboring with Afghanistan, China, Kazakhstan. As you see from this map, this is all our neighbors. So it's a very small country, mountainous. 93% of the country is mountain, and only 7% of it is flat, where more than 9 million of its population live. So this is a picture of our mountains and some unique stuff we have in Tajikistan. We have a few unique things this is the picture of Marco Polo goat, which is very unique in the world. And we have the highest mountain peak in the world with and lots of other mountains with a lot of precious and semi-precious stones. So we are very lucky with our nature, I would say. We have 4 seasons and very nice nature, clean, a lot of drinking water, rivers, lakes, and very beautiful place to live. So our land also has a lot of organic fruits and vegetables and healthy herbs. We are a democratic country. Our religion is Islam and language is Farsi. It's quite an interesting place to visit for tourists, which we are actually going to these days, working so hard to attract a lot of tourists to Tajikistan. And one thing I must say about Tajik people, we really love guests. So in this slide, I put out some pictures of former Tajikistan and new Tajikistan. Actually, it's not the whole Tajikistan, but the capital of Tajikistan, Dushanbe, which is translated as Monday, by the way. So from those pictures, can we have the previous slide, please? 1 second. Thank you. So in the upper line, you can see old Dushanbe. So this is all Soviet buildings. And in the below, you can see our Palace of Nation. This is a very huge, nice building. And these small new buildings had been built recently. So the surface of our capital is really changing very fast these days. A lot of new high buildings are being built. They are modern and meant to attract and comfort tourists. But from the capital of modern cities, one should not actually judge the condition of the economy of the whole country. In fact, to UN, it is ranked as a 127th out of 189 countries on the term of human development. By official data, 27.4% of the population lives below the national poverty line. But if I add my level of judgment, the whole country is not doing so well, as you could see from the capital. Not doing well, I would say, in the term of education and healthcare. As a matter of fact, half of the population, and usually half of the men population, and nowadays even women, has migrated to Russia to make living, because we have problems with finding job in Tajikistan. We don't have a lot of businesses growing in here or just starting. So this is why people leave to Russia. And especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people started migrating to Russia, which was like the only hope for making money. So the income of almost the whole country come from Russia, I would say. So while men making living in Russia, women have to take care of children and stay home. This it is also considered as a cultural thing that men are obliged to provide for family and women stay home, like in very, very old times. That is why a lot of women in Tajikistan are not very interested or eager to get full secondary education or continue to get higher education. They're not very interested, and it is in most of the cases, it's their choice. Maybe sometimes they're forced by family to get married, but in the majority of time, it's better for them to get married and be provided. So, of course, people have right to choose their own path, but also we have ability to make wrong choices. During the period of being a part of Soviet Union, many men, all men and women were equally working, and education was the first priority in life and very prestigious thing to have for everyone. After Russians left the country, and so did lots of intelligent Tajiks, we had gone back to the years before the Russian Revolution came to Tajikistan and Central Asia. Maybe the surface of the situation talks different, but the bottom and the truth is a bit different. So being a strong believer myself in good, and being so lucky to have met so many independent, strong women and friends in my life, I'm strong believer that we will develop, and we are these days investing very much energy to it, and trying to bring changes and develop. I'm working actually on this development, I can say, even since I graduated at Pedagogical University, and I became a teacher of English, but I contributed actually 9 years of my time to work in the public school and to give children a good quality education. I mean, to bring, because I'm a teacher of English, by the way, and because I had more chances to speak to English native speakers, I knew English better, and I decided to stay at school and help children to learn English better, because this is a very powerful language these days all over the world. So working at school and in parallel, working at school actually doesn't pay a lot in Tajikistan. It's very miserable, in fact, the salary. And in parallel, I used to do and still am making fashionable clothes and some other type of clothes, working clothes for a lot of customers, and mostly of them are foreigners, expatriates. And through this, I used to make my livings, and also met a lot of wonderful people who helped me actually to make this fashion and my skills as a real great tool to become independent myself, and today to help other women to become empowered. Of course, I couldn't have done it myself, and like I said, in parallel, I was working in this, and I met Joe. By the way, I met Joe Baker through this project we have been attending. It was Design Dushanbe project on fashion and fashion for the cause, and it was they were charity events helping young designers to promote themselves and make more customers and have experienced this nice atmosphere of catwalk and be more professional. I was very lucky to meet these people in my life, and this is how I became, and with their advices and encouragement, I became who I became today. So, and they basically handed over their mission to me, and this is why I established this my organization in 2018, Development of Foxcraft and Young Designers, specializing in traditional but modern crafts and fashion itself. The organization aims to educate and empower women using fashion as a tool, as we did before. And we are planning to change a lot through this, through our project, and making changes for women's lives. We are a young organization yet, but we already completed a project called We Did It, supported by UK Embassy, and already achieved good results. As you can see in this slide, this is our products, what we make. And we achieved these results during this 6 months project supported by British government, the UK Embassy in Tajikistan. And this products had been sold quite well, and we got a lot of new orders, and women they had been working and making their incomes, and they're very happy. And we trained more than 20 4 women during this. Actually 30, but 24 left to continue with us. And in the year 2020, when the COVID spread all over the world, the main focus of all human became health security and activities, and our activities on handicraft and fashion, unfortunately, had stopped. So as you can see from this slide, this is the statistic on COVID in Tajikistan, but this is a little bit old statistic. It has been updated. The statistic yesterday on COVID is infected 10,596, recovered 8,915, and death rate is 78 by official data. During the whole period of COVID, we didn't have very much restricted quarantine in Tajikistan, but it was more limited access to work. People are taking precautions as they are strongly recommended by Ministry of Health of Tajikistan. Social gatherings are restricted, or I would say limited, but they're still happening, small gatherings. And some schools, they had been locked for a few months, but now they're working, schools and universities and kindergartens. Everyone go to work, but they have to really be distant. And they're all every day lectured on that, and the government and the Ministry of Health is really good, actually doing a good job on this, bringing the information to people every day. And there are these screens all over the town showing and talking about COVID and bringing information on it. So COVID brought not positive impact on our economy as it did for the whole world, as we know. Social and economic inequality is growing in Tajikistan, and it seems to be for a long term. So in order, and our organization, in order to keep going and to show resilience, actually our response to COVID was to join the Association of Organizations in Tajikistan. It's CSO organizations usually, which were helping doctors with aid, providing them with PPE, vitamins for health, brought from America and sent, funded from American Tajiks abroad, and medical equipment. So our part of the job of my organization's part of the job was to design and make a specially comfortable and adapted to the condition of family doctors, Tajik family doctors, PPE, medical scraps. This is from the picture you can see what we have made, but this is, they're wearing not the whole thing, they're more protected than that. They have these additional sleeves and shoe covers, and very much protected from getting infected, actually. And they were very happy to receive this aid from us and from our donors, actually. We were supported on making that. So also we did this not only to help the doctors, but also to help our women, the group we established through that project. We did it, as I said, because the handicraft is not in a big demand these days, and fashion as well. We decided to continue making, still sewing, and still using our skills in a good and useful direction. So women, of course, we were doing also social distancing in one room. For example, 2 seamstresses could come and make, and we were creating shifts for them just to keep them protected and very distant, not to get ill. And in fact, some of them get ill, not coming to work, but from home. Some of them are still working from home, making embroidery. We still hope that the demand for our embroidery, national embroidery, and the stuff, the items of home decor, which we are usually producing, will be back to demand and back to market again. So now we are a process while the whole world is so much caring about the health condition of ourselves. We decided to adapt to the situation and only produce very useful items for use of people. And 2 very special items today we are producing are felt shoes, which are very healthy for human health, we believe. And another product is eco bags, which are very useful for every time, in all time of period. And with this eco bags, we want to very much encourage people to use to use these bags instead of plastic bags. And our bags are for many time use. We really care about nature, and we try to get other people to start caring too and get finished with plastic, which is so bad for environment. So yeah, these 2 products we're doing now, and we plan to continue with this project and trying to start new projects. In fact, our project we did it were not finished quite yet, because we were supposed to have a second phase, training women in the second phase, training them on law, giving them knowledge on law, business legislation, and also the law of women on women rights, or the law on equality. So we didn't finish this training, so we really hope to continue with that and to make women more educated, skilled, empowered, and making them to be economically independent as well, help their families and help their husbands as well to be equal to their husbands. And also it will be very good impact on the whole country development if women and men equally work together and develop the country. We are trying really much to encourage women that you are part of a very good part of actually society, and you have to invest on development of yourself, your family, and which is more important as well, our future, our kids. So educated women, educated families, and very much developed country. So we continue our work supporting women to learn new skills, build their confidence and access in income. And we really hope that we will be able to find support to continue and actually extend our groups, including more and more women, and this time from the rural areas, because they are being very much limited from access to education as well, mostly they. So thank you. This is my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And again, I was very happy to be able to get a chance to do this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think if we were all in the room, there'd be an enormous round of applause. You did fantastically, and the technology held up. So that's Jo Baker's can relax now. She was so worried about the technology. I think you've given us a history lesson. You've done a fantastic job on tourism. Once we can all start flying again, I think we'll all be visiting. And I think what's very interesting between your presentation and Charles's is that you've both quoted the COVID deaths, but you've both put in figures about recovery. And I think that's really gives everybody hope. And I think we should all sort of focus on that part. That was really good. You obviously said it's all about being lucky, but it's also about very hard work and your determination. And I think that's come through considerably. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask Nina now to do her presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end. But thank you once again. Well done. So, Panina, I'm going to hand over to you, and I think you're going to round the presentations off talking about inequality, injustice, and hopefully give us an inspirational talk to round off the afternoon. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you. It's been really inspiring listening to everybody else in terms of their input. I am conscious of time, so I might end up leaving quite a few of the things I was going to speak about just to allow for the questions and stuff, including, I'm not sure whether anybody reads bios, but I might not necessarily get too much into that. But basically, I identify as an anti-racist activist, community organizer, and I'm the director of the Racial Justice Network. And so I'll kind of like sum up a lot of what's been said already, stuff that we're already doing. So it might be just more like affirming or reinforcing some of that. So yeah, clearly the topic was around racial, challenging injustice and racial inequality. In terms of who we are, maybe a little bit, I was born and grew up in Kenya, and I came here in my teens. So I've spent all my adult life here, which is starting to feel like quite a long time. And I talk about the challenges that I face here, kind of somewhat catalyzed me to kind of taking action. And a lot of that stuff has obviously meant I've worked in a sectors, kind of homelessness, including TOUCHSTONE, and now kind of focused a little bit more around racial justice or race injustice, which is still social justice activities. So just to kind of, in terms of who we are, is we're based, and this is because obviously everybody else is given a bit of a geographical tour and everything else. So maybe for the sake of people who are not in the UK, we are based in the north of England. And yeah, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, Leeds, Yorkshire region. But we're also doing work in Kenya, which I'll kind of briefly mention, and also in Brazil. So the work is obviously being in the north. The reason I say the north is because of kind of there's a lot of London centricity, but also adversities and maybe solutions that we have in the north that don't necessarily apply to every part of the country. So we seek to bring, as it says there, holistic, societal, environmental, spiritual, and cultural repairs to address colonial legacies. We maintain race at core of our work and how it intersects with other identities or oppressions. And this, for me, has been key because of what people know or understand as Oppression Olympics, where people are like, you either bring one or all, but also like a real huge part of it is how diversity colonized race. So the language around diversity took away the ability to really unpack some of the protected characteristics. So we become almost like we know everything and don't know anything at all because we just use the word diversity. So we wanted to focus on race and kind of bring it to mainstream thought and give people the tools to talk and unpack it, because the assumption and the association of race and racism or racist as being bad means people like shut down and completely like barriers up when any race conversations are brought up. So we wanted to bring that ability back to be able to talk about it. And the focus on colonial legacies is because a lot of we've had like lots and lots of like Equality Act, Race Acts, and all sorts of things, but it really never addresses the root cause of why is it that we fear, why is it we have anxieties, why is it that we push people aside because of their ethnicity, where they're born, and all of that stuff. So colonialism has a lot to answer, and that's why we were pushing it more towards that, because the conditions that we exist in now, and hearing the examples, whether it's in Malawi, it's any part of the world, are a lot connected a lot to colonialism, and this again I'll maybe briefly mention when I talk later on. And it's also something about moving racism from being an individual or seen just as an individual activity to an institutional thing, because society spent centuries institutionalizing racism. So a lot of what we try and tackle is not just, not saying the N-word or not saying go back where you come from. It's really understanding it in a kind of bigger, in a complexity that it has. We work with predominantly racially minoritized communities, obviously here and around Leeds, Bradford, Halifax, wherever else. And part of that was the silencing, the normalization of powerlessness, the being spoken for, and solutions not being held as if they can come from those communities. It's we wanted to kind of take away from that, to invest in those communities, because the communities know what they need. The communities know the harms and the experiences that they're having, and so it's consulting, but also investing in those and giving agency or allowing for agency to to emerge from those communities. So how we do that is we mobilize, we train, we inform and influence. So we do a lot of training to the Black and Brown communities. We do a lot of training to other communities as well, not just, and again, this is further down. We utilize the media and public spaces such as this to sensitize or conscientize people to really waking up to what's happening around, because there's a sense of if it's not in your immediate view, it's not happening. So it's because we're working on the ground and seeing and experiencing these things, we want people to know, but also encourage people to take up the banner and push back, whether it's challenging what forms it comes in, whether it's the hostile environment, whether it's how over policing of Black and Brown communities and things like that. So some of our projects, and these are just a couple that I thought at least I could quickly mention, is like collective conversations, which is what we've done to try and bring race conversations or give race analysis to contexts like sexuality, to disability, to education, because the way it's seen, or the people who are working with these sectors, for example, will say, yeah, we're working on disability, but they lack the race analysis of what does it mean for somebody who's Black, has mental health issues, is also gay, is also a woman. So what does that mean? All those multiple components of oppressions and how they impact on people. So doing the collective conversations was us taking these conversations to the community, again, to bring it to mainstream thought, but also to just get people to look at an angle that they haven't necessarily looked at. The 13th recommendation is a campaign that we're working on right now, which is to do with climate. And it's again the same thing around when we look at climate and the climate movement, it lacks that international concept. It lacks that colonial legacies that are left in terms of the resources that are lacking in the countries who are facing the worst calamities in terms of climate or being able to deal with it. So we wanted to bring that in, and that's kind of the campaign. So and then we have Unlearning Racism, which is a course that we designed for white people, run by white people, for white people to kind of really work out and understand how race works, and really understand that also they have a duty to do this. The work shouldn't just be left to the oppressed people to kind of constantly push back and challenge. So a lot of it is around application. Stop the Scan campaign is also another one that we're doing currently around policing, but also how the technology is being used to tackle or to push back or to target communities who've migrated, communities who are black and brown, and which means that somebody who stopped and scanned could very quickly come from the street and to the detention and deportations. So we kind of, again, a lot of this stuff comes from the communities themselves, and then we take the work on and then we push forward. Internationalism, as I've said, we're working on that. And that was more because of recognizing, even though we're working in the UK or we live in the UK, a lot of what comes in is, again, as I say, rooted in colonialism and enslavement of people, including the mines. How do we tackle it here without tackling where it's also some of those, the tentacles where they kind of sit? And maybe lastly, because I know the conversation today was around COVID response, was what we did when the lockdown was announced. We went to the communities, we spoke to them and asked them what was going on and the experiences. Again, for people who might not know, when you migrate and you're going through the asylum system, you're not allowed to work. Again, you're given education level on a certain level. A lot of the people who are going through this have already faced traumas in terms of where they come from, whether it's war-torn countries, it's, the atrocities, the torture coming at the back of the lorries, Mediterranean, all of that stuff. But then when they get here, they kind of get another layer of horrible things going on. So people were not allowed to work, people who haven't got English as a first language. Again, I feel lucky that I am able to communicate as I am, but English is my third language. So we wanted to and technology as well, and people not having devices. So I heard what was said about the digital, the support that was offered for people to buy laptops and phones, and we did the same. So we took up, when we realized what was going on and people, yes, we focused on providing food parcels, but what about the social aspect and the mental health and what was happening? So we took upon ourselves to kind of start a campaign, ask for donations, for phones, for activity books, for children, puzzles, all sorts of things, and we took it. And within the space of a month, we'd managed to reach about 500 people just in West Yorkshire. And this is just one, because I could go on a lot more, but I want to just focus on that one because this was a question, because we've heard about the multiple barriers. And I think even when COVID came out and the language came out about who are mostly impacted, there was a question of, oh, we're making this about race again. And it wasn't so much about that, because it's all the other socioeconomic conditions that people live in that mean you're likely to not just get it, but the effects of it are likely to affect you more. But what we've seen, and maybe I should have said, I also co-chair the Equality Forum in Bradford. And what we are constantly, and a person who's working in the voluntary sector is really constantly trying to pull and highlight the need, but also for working together. Maybe on the next slide, go to the next slide, please. The need to work together because of the resources that we have are not that much, but also there is intelligence that perhaps are held in one community or one group or one sector, and another has resources that could work together to really push back or to really ensure that equity is being addressed or inequality is being addressed in ways that actually it supports the communities who are experiencing these dangers. So in our findings, and again, I've put there at the top, nothing about us without us is for us, is because what we have seen, and I think it was really heartwarming to hear even about the Sikh elders, about what's happening in Malawi and Tajikistan, because if the communities are coming from their own perspectives and their own experiences and emerging with those solutions, that they're more likely, A, to work, B, they're more likely to actually be effective in terms of feeling like I'm part of it. I've brought this up because what we see is people stuck in rooms, coming up with solutions and then parachuting into a place and going and saying this is what's got to happen, and lo and behold, it doesn't work. But also the people who actually benefit from are the people who are working in these sectors, because the way the funding world works, you know, the people who are going in as professionals are the ones who get the funding, as opposed, and then that only sustains people's roles and jobs as opposed to really underlying issues. So we kind of end up celebrating victimhood, and this is kind of international. It's just, and it's in all sectors where we see people as people who need help, as opposed to people who are resilient, people who have solutions. Because when you think and look through, even again, the examples that have been given here, what people have endured and what people have survived from, is actually quite inspiring. And think, people are not just victims. Yes, there's situations and conditions that are created to keep them in those places, but the saving that tends to happen, whether it's on a local circle or regional or international, when we go into these places to help them, it takes away the agency from those communities, and that needs to stop. The innovation needs to be celebrated, and it also kind of continues that sense of monetizing everything and hitting targets and creating business models to meet and do stuff. And then within those, the privileges and the hierarchies that emerge, there's tensions, and there's people who's constantly at the top and people who constantly at the bottom. So for us, and also the complacency, as I put it there, because, for example, with the hostile environment, we have everybody becoming a border force, checking people's, how long are you entitled, are you not entitled? We have the Equality Act on one hand saying you should not be treated differently because of A, B, C, D, or in terms of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and all of these things. And then literally a second later, you're going, are you entitled? Because if you're not entitled, or if your status is not regularized, you're not entitled. And so we become the players in this game. And because we're threatened with things like fines, and we're threatened with things like getting closed down, people continue and almost turn the other way. So for us, it's kind of, that is what the situation has led us to. Maybe the final one, I think it's the final one. I am talking really fast, and I talk fast anyway, but I'm talking even faster. But I hope if there is anybody who wants to ask or follow up, there is, I've put our details there, so to just check up on all other pieces of work that we're doing, and rather than this, because I'm rushing through. But our takeaway is and I think this was heard in previous conversations about how interconnected everything is. You cannot resolve one and leave the other. I think Martin Luther talks about freedom, you can't, for all kind of thing. So a lot of what we're pushing for is, if you can understand how everything is interconnected, it means we need to go at the root cause, which is radical. And it's not the radical that we have the government talking about. Radical is really addressing at the root. So the work, or anything that needs to happen, and the work that needs to happen needs to start from the root. If we're not just, because otherwise what we're doing is sticking plasters and dealing with, for example, the symptoms, as opposed to what's really causing it. So I again, in my time at TOUCHSTONE, also wrote an article called "To Decolonize Mental Health." And I was, first of all, not necessarily pushing or encouraging medication. I know it works sometimes, but it's recognizing how agency and community values have been taken away, which means once we monetize, we assume the only people who can come and sort things out are people, professionals. So you take away the agency of communities looking after each other and looking after their own. And then when that money is pulled away, everything collapses. So, in a way, the way I was pushing for not just the article around recognizing mental health and decolonizing, because of some of the experiences that Black and Brown communities have when they go and engage with the services, was a concept called Ubuntu, which is a South African, it's South African, around I am because we are, and it's kind of like carrying the community with you, because what we see is capitalism definitely has pushed the concept of individualism, and it's about me, and it's about my money, it's about my house, and all of that stuff, and that sense of community being taken away. I was really pleased when now we have like things like social prescribing and all of that stuff, because it means we're looking at other ways of healing, other ways of repairing that are outside of kind of the pharmaceuticals, outside of business models, because that doesn't necessarily meet everybody's need. And when you talk about again, in Leeds and Bradford or in West Yorkshire, we have really diverse communities. And assuming one size fits all has been a real danger and disservice to not just the communities, but to the professionals as well, because how can we keep doing something and if it's not resolving anything? So going and addressing from the bottom and engaging with these communities in their languages, which is, again, hearing about the Sikh elders, because if you connect with somebody with their language and you're engaging with them from their perspective, it creates a whole difference. So the Ubuntu mentality or model of doing and seeing things is something that we need to reclaim, because it's things that we've lost as we've kind of chasing after the money and hitting targets. So I also talked about listening and open to learning, because for us, for any of the work that we do, we have to begin with listening. Because if I'm coming to you with solution and I haven't even asked you, I haven't spoken to you, then how am I doing what you need? So I think all sectors need to begin with that point. And having that intersectional approach. So I say, obviously, we have race at the core and then intersect race with everything else. But that intersectional approach means, A, we center the most marginalized. So we're least likely to leave anybody behind, and obviously counter that whole, yeah, what about me? Because if you understand how oppression works, if you understand how struggles exist, then and you kind of, the multiple barriers that are there, then you come up with solutions that impact on all of those barriers. So the intersectional approach needs to happen, because some of these whole divisive things that have been the divide and conquer have actually created a sense of competition as opposed to collaboration within different sectors, whether it's the VCS and the NHS, whether it's between the LGBT community and the disability community, whether it's kind of all of that stuff. So if we cannot come up with a rounded view of doing things, it's more likely to embrace everybody and for all of us to kind of push forward together as opposed to constantly leaving others behind. Honoring and acknowledging lived experience or trauma informed, because there is, again, within the hierarchies of having learned experience, you know, it was really interesting to hear you ask about learn and Manuchera said, no, this I've just learned through the community, because sometimes there's a sense that we learn, and I say this as a person who's doing a PhD on how coloniality impacts on Black activism, but I know when we hold up that the knowledge that matters is the knowledge that's learned, we really ignore. So for me, for example, I have, you know, a long time experience of living in this body as a Black woman who's migrated into the UK, and that matters as opposed to somebody who's learned it in a year and then comes in to tell me as or classifies as an expert. So honoring those lived experience and also acknowledging them in a way where we resource equitably. So there is a sense of when we ask people to come and speak, especially if it's about experience, we're not paying them. But when we're inviting somebody who has multiple, I don't know, letters to their name, we have a budget. So it's honoring that and acknowledging it within the solutions as well. And to last, or as a last point, is around reparatory justice or reparative justice, as I put it there, because if we understand all of what we're experiencing has been stuff that's been created, again, I say to do with capitalism, we know that there's a debt that's owed. When we're talking about climate justice, when we're talking about colonial legacies, migration, and all of that stuff, it's stuff that's been started or installed. That means we're in this mess now. So if we acknowledge and see that we have a debt, we owe a debt to these communities who are not in a good place, and it's not to come in and almost kind of do it as a savior and, you know, people need to be have a lot of gratitude. We see it as we owe a debt to ensure these communities are heard, are sorted. Then it changes the dynamic of how we engage with them as opposed to wanting a lot of gratitude and all of that stuff. So again, I'm probably gone over, but I've tried to squeeze in a lot, and I think maybe just a word, it's Angela Davis who says, if they come to me for me in the morning, they'll come to you in the afternoon, is a sense that even though we think things are not necessarily impacting directly on us, at some point they will. And I think COVID has showed how there is no borders, even though we have borders and kind of constantly putting people at the door and stopping them from going through. We allow money to come in, but we have an issue with bodies crossing the borders. But it's kind of that sense of whatever it is that we do and we see somebody else who's struggling or other communities that we have a part to play in that, because if they come for you in the morning, me in the morning, they'll come for you in the afternoon. So yeah, thanks.
Penny, thank you so much. The amount of chat comments congratulating you on your passion, and what you've said has been amazing. I think you've talked about healing and repairing. I think those are two very, very important things. And you also talked about the complexity of this and the need for collective conversations. I think this webinar has started some collective conversations, even if they're only online and through chat. People wanting to connect with one another. Oh, I've got some terrible feedback from someone. Can we go on mute, please? Somebody sounds as though they're in a train. I think what our webinar has shown today is the passion for all these speakers. I'd just like to open it up for questions, and I know Rob Webster's now joined us on the call. So Rob, you've missed a world tour in this seminar. We've been from Malawi to Leeds to Tajikistan and back to Leeds, and you've missed a fantastic world tour. So Rob, I don't know if you'd like to say anything, or if you've got any questions, or if there's any questions in the chat, Karen, please.
All I'd say, I heard Penny's talk, which was fantastic, and interested to hear the questions actually, and the conversation, because I think we've got some time at the end to say what we want to anyway, Hilary. So I'd like to hear from people on the call really, and their experience, their questions.
Shall I pop to the chat box, Hilary, first, and that yeah, and then that might encourage other people to put lots of standing ovations for Penny. Absolutely compelling case for us to start to address the causes of injustice rather than the symptoms. Very well said, that one. The work from Caroline O'Neill, the work on race matters at all levels of support. Opportunities for making connections are so important. Just lots and lots of chat, really, if I'm honest. Brilliant session, well done. Let's have a little look on some of the stuff that came in.
If anyone's got a
please do.
Question, do they want to just put their hand up?
That's a good idea. It's just basically, yeah. Oh, good. Sorry,
Karen, I'd just like to ask Panya Chera. She showed us some photographs of lots of new buildings. I just wondered, who is it investing in all these new buildings? Is it buildings for the community, or is it just buildings for the sake of buildings?
Some of them are buildings for the community, and they're mostly very huge business buildings are built, but also because our population is rising for the lately years. So we are demolishing these old 2 storage buildings, block of flats, and there are now growing very high block of flats buildings for living, which are meant to be for this population raising. And about the investment, from what I personally know, it's usually businessmen, because we have some quite rich businessmen in Tajikistan, and they are doing business of building and selling these flats. So far, I know only that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Penny, you talked about collective conversations. Who are you having your collective conversations with at the moment?
So we've moved most of our collective conversations online because of COVID, but before that we'd pick a theme every month and invite members of the public to come in, and then we would share from this perspective, and again, like, to platform and listen to the communities who are affected. So when we did, for example, the disability event, we had people who had, who are Black or brown, and from those communities, talking not just about the experience, but the level of, like, the barriers that they face, but also what they consider solutions. And we invited the public to come in and listen, but also say to work forward. And I think, yeah, so that's kind of where some conversations are completely wide open. Like we've got an event next week, the launch of the 13th on the 13th of October, and that's to do with climate. But for me, the push for climate is also to see how climate affects everything, as opposed to climate movement or people only the ones interested in climate. We should all be interested in climate because of what we're seeing and experiencing. So, which is kind of why I'm talking about the interconnectedness of everything, and for us needing to invest whatever we can, whether, and I think there is a danger or fear of activism as people who have to be constantly going out with banners. And I say that's not what we're asking everybody to do. It's just, if people are conscious of what's going on, they're likely to either check in or challenge or call in or call out a colleague, a family member, or beyond. So, but we could also contribute with writing. We could contribute with doing anything on social media. That means the people who are experiencing these things are not the only voices who are saying this stuff. And I think I noticed a comment from Mike Chitty. And yeah, thanks for the other comments. I'll just kind of read them through right now around whiteness, because the reason why we designed Unlearning Racism, as I said before, was to for me, the burn of constantly coming in to talk about race as a Black person. We said we never platform whiteness. We never ask, what does it mean to be white? Because whenever we have race conversation, we immediately, our reaction is going to Black communities. And when we really understand what it means to be white, we're likely to understand what it means not to be white, because that level of dehumanization, or kind of that happened through enslavement and colonization, but making people into objects, is why people are not bothered when they see bodies lying on the sea or kind of getting across, because there is a detachment there. And I think for me, if there is a question of asking people to do more, is to really connect back with that humanity, because some of that has been lost through careers, through jobs, through schooling and education, or miseducation in this case. We need to connect back to that, because what COVID has done, and I think why we had the Black Lives Matter emerge the way it did, we had COVID, a moment almost of people to really stop and consider and reflect, and then that happened. So if there is anything else that we need to do, is still continue using these moments to check ourselves and check around us, because we shouldn't continue to exist as we are when people are suffering, either going down the mines, and again, conversation around climate, we want to electric cars, they come at a cost. Look at Congo, look at Sierra Leone, look at all those places. We need to kind of connect back and open our eyes and use these moments before we push back into like everything back as usual in terms of like, I don't know, jobs and traffic and everything else. We need to continue, and that for me is that call to connect back with ourselves.
Thank you, Penny. I think climate change and all to do with environment and climate probably cuts right across the world. And Charles mentioned the importance of agriculture, and Manchera talked about having to diversify and make felt shoes and eco bags to be friendly. I know that's a very small part of it, but it is all our problem and it's all our issue. And again, you've brought it back to, it's all about people and thinking about people, and that ties in very well. I think that tomorrow is World Mental Health Day, and we all have to think about our resilience and our mental health as well as our physical health at the moment, and about caring for other people. I'm just going to do a couple of sentences of roundup, and then I think Rob's going to actually close the session down. I just want to say that the passion of all our speakers has been tremendous. You are all influencers, and you're all so much energy and tenacity and strength to keep going, that I think you've been an inspiration for everybody on the call this morning, this afternoon. I think you've given us all hope. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. And I think this conversation is going to continue well into weeks, days, months, years. And hopefully we'll all have a trip to either Malawi or Tajikistan. And we'll start, you can start exporting your felt bags and your embroidered items and have them in West Yorkshire on sale. It's been fantastic meeting all of you. I'm sorry it's been virtual, but thank goodness for digital and thank goodness for technology. And thank you, Joe, for making sure that this all worked. You were instrumental in this. Have a good afternoon, everybody, and over to Rob.
Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry that I've missed quite a lot of this. There was a call to attend a meeting with national leaders over where we are in the coronavirus crisis and what we're doing to address it. I think that these sessions are always inspiring, and they're always a reminder of what we can do if we work together. And if we're going to work together, we have to come from a place of understanding, a place of compassion, and I think a place of togetherness. And in our partnership, we've got a broad range of people in different places, in different organisations, in different sectors. And what we try and concentrate on is what we're doing this for. And we settle on, well, we're doing this to improve outcomes for local people. We're doing this to reduce health inequalities that blight different communities. We're doing this to get rid of unwarranted variation in care. And we're doing this to manage our resources so we can have the biggest impact that we can. And it seems to me if we're going to do that, particularly at the moment, particularly in the COVID context, then we can start to look at things in economic recovery, like we are doing around housing and education and the environment. And we've got a big part to play in that, and the impact that the recovery of the economy has on people. And we do that as we focus on how COVID's having a disproportionate impact upon different communities. And it's been really good to hear in the conversations Penny's been having. We've got a climate summit next week because it affects all of us. And when we're doing that climate summit, are we doing that through the lens of inequality? Or are we not? Have we heard the voices of people in our communities about what it means to them? Is a good challenge, I think, that we'll take into that conversation. The Economic Recovery Board is going to be looking at that. The work that we've been doing on the impact of COVID on our Black, Asian and other ethnic communities is reporting on the 22nd of October, and we can bring the challenge from some of this conversation to it. But what I would say is there's two real takeaways for me. One is that, all of this is about connecting more of the system to itself. And that's what we're constantly doing. We're constantly saying, look, somebody's doing some work over here. If it was connected to that bit of work, it would actually make a bigger difference. And the fact that there's so much good work going on here, and the fact that there's so much good work that we can draw on internationally through connections we've got, means that we could make a bigger difference. But the other takeaway is that we'll only make a bigger difference if we really come from a position of understanding. And that requires us to open our eyes to the fact that we all have ethnicity. As Penny says, it's not for people with black or brown skin to be the champions of issues around ethnicity. We were all affected by it. And the work we've done on white privilege, white fragility is as important as the other work we've been doing. Well, what we have to do is, if we're going to use a buzzword and a bit of jargon around co-production, then we don't co-produce the answers. We start with what the issues are. So if we co-produce what the issues are, then we get to a better solution. And I think Penny talked very powerfully to that. So I think that as a partnership, we should be courageous and open to challenge and ideas. We should recognise that, as Penny said, I think activism is about saying, actually, we're just going to do things completely differently in this context now around the way we spend our money, because we can. And we're going to co-produce the issues together rather than just focus on the ones that are being given to us. That's quite an activist standpoint, I would say. I think if we work together on all of that, then we can really make a fundamental difference to issues that have blighted us for decades. Now, thank you to, I think I'm just going to say thank you to Sam, to Charles, to Penny, and I think we've lost. Oh no, Mana Chair is back, so thank you, Mana Chair, as well. So thank you for bringing your wisdom and challenge to us. I think the challenge I'd give to all of us on the call now is let's listen and let's hear what's being said and make sure we do something about it. So thank you, everybody. And thanks to everybody who put the session together. And thanks to Hilary, as ever, for standing in when I got hiked off at the last minute. It really does make a difference. So thank you, everybody.